I think I will be better positioned to unite the country, to win the next election in a landslide. I don't think there's another Republican in this race who can deliver a Reagan 1980 style landslide like I think I'm in a position to do.
So Ramaswamy has, I'm not going to call it a new line because maybe he said it before, I just hadn't noticed, but he has this line that he's been saying about how he thinks he's the only candidate who can deliver a landslide, and he compares it to Reagan's elections in 1980 and 1984. Now, Ramaswamy supporters tend to get very upset when you speak out against him, and I'm really trying to be as fair as I possibly can be when I say this. I think he could win a general election against Biden, and I believe any Republican could win a general election against Biden, depending on the circumstances. But make no mistake about it, Ramaswamy, if he's the nominee, and this is the same for every other Republican in this race, they are going to, maybe they win a general election, they are going to definitely lose the popular vote. And the reason for that is very simple. Republicans are characterized by political views that are alienating of various groups. This includes LGBT people, minorities for the most part. So when you look at that, and you also look at someone like Haley, who made a point of mentioning during her campaign announcement video, Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections. Yeah, because you're alienating of various people. So on average, there's a very large segment of millions of people, in fact, who just will never vote for you. And it seems to have gotten bigger over time. I mean, Trump was able to win in 2016 while losing the popular vote to Hillary by over 2 million votes. And then in the second, or rather in his failed attempt at a re-election bid, he lost the popular vote to Biden by over 6 million, even though he did, to his credit, increase his number of votes by over 10 million, so 74 million, if I remember correctly. But he actually became the first, as far as I can tell, the first U.S. president to be on a presidential ticket, so in 2 consecutive elections, and win the popular vote neither time, which is historic. That's record levels of unpopularity. But going back to what I was saying, me claiming that Ramaswamy is going to lose the popular vote is based around him having positions that are very similar to Trump, which is one of the reasons why he's getting some traction, I think, in the primary. But I don't think it's enough in a general election. It might be enough to win, again, depending on what the circumstances are. I don't think it's enough to win the popular vote. And if you can't win the popular vote, you are most certainly not going to win in a landslide. And the sad thing is, because I'm really attempting to make this point here, this has almost nothing to do with Ramaswamy himself being some awful candidate or anything like that, but just the U.S. is an extremely polarized country. And when I say that, I'm not even just talking about, these people here like this. No, I mean that there are certain states that you could run Jesus himself on either party's ticket and he would still lose. So if you run a Democrat in Alabama statewide, they're going to lose. If you run a Republican in California statewide, they're going to lose. And what I don't think a lot of these candidates and a lot of these supporters seem to get is that when you go back to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, that this like time period that was 20 years removed from the civil rights movement, you had varying ideologies in both parties. You had the liberal Republicans, the moderate Republicans, the Democrats that were part of that New Deal coalition that wanted civil rights, Democrats who maybe liked some of the New Deal stuff but were segregationists. Basically, back then it was realistic that you could run a candidate and they could be from the Democratic Party, like Carter in 1976, and win all of the South, right? And then 4 years later, you could run somebody from the West, like Reagan, and they win the South and all of these other states. But there's a reason why after Bush beat Dukakis handedly in 88, you don't see landslides anymore. Now in 92, that was because you had Perot running and splitting the vote with Bush, whatever. But in the case of elections after that, you really start to see the kind of regional voting systems now where the South is Republicans, the West is, for the most part, Democrats, and there are some states that are not as red as others. Like, you could say that Arizona and Georgia are kind of like both leaning towards being purple at this point, but it's still not enough for it to really mean that pretty much the thing about presidential elections back during those time periods was because of all the varying ideologies, you could get landslide victories depending on how good your candidate was and the circumstances. Ramaswamy could run against Biden, who is on his, like a version of Biden that's like sitting at home, not even campaigning, and Biden is going to not only get more votes than him, but also, have a certain 20 plus states locked down like that just will never vote for a Republican. And, to the Republicans' credits, they have the same thing with the South. Even if some states are not as red as others, like, Georgia and Louisiana, and to a arguable extent Texas as well. All I'm getting at is I think Trump is going to win this primary just because of the way polling is going now. Again, I know we're months and months apart. Something could change. I like I said, Ramaswamy has had a big, giant surge in the last 2 months. I'm not disputing that. So, I could see him getting even bigger, especially after the debate performance where I think he handled himself. He was basically the center attraction of it. But when it comes to the general election, I can't see a scenario where he wins in a landslide. Maybe he gets 300 electoral votes. Maybe he only loses the popular vote by 2 million like Trump did in 2016. But it's not going to be enough to win an election by some massive degree. And that's not me insulting him or saying that he's a crappy candidate, even though I do not agree with him on a lot of, but again, that's all the Republicans at this point. It's me just saying that there is a very clear pattern, and I'm not going to pretend it's being circumvented by someone who has similar positions to the last person that was a casualty of that system. So like if Ramaswamy had completely different positions from Trump and was just night and day opposite of him, I would say, okay, man, the Republicans are nominating somebody that I could see them tapping into some people that don't vote and, maybe doing something. But I'm sorry, his positions are very similar to Trump. And like I said, Trump was the Republican nominee 2 times in a row and lost the popular vote both times. Again, he won the first election. No one's disputed. Well, I didn't dispute that. My point is, I just can't see it. I'm not going to look at a pattern of 7 out of the last 8 elections being the popular vote anyway being won by Democrats, and then tell you that Ramaswamy is going to come around, have the borderline exact same positions as the guy that lost it twice, and somehow be able to get more people to support him than one of the most famous men in the world. So, like I said, this is not an insult towards him. I'm not trying to make any type of like specific nasty targeting of. I'm just noticing that he keeps making this comment, and I don't think there's any legs for it to stand on. I think he could win against Biden. I'd be more tempted to say I'd believe more in him in a general election, a primary, because everybody's getting crushed in the primary by Trump right now, which again could change at some point. But a general election victory by Republicans where they win the Electoral College and the popular vote is not going to happen anytime for the foreseeable future. Just to end this on a bleak note, the Republicans haven't won the popular vote since I was 6 years old. That's all you need to know. And no one whose name wasn't Bush has won it in 39 years, ever since '84. So again, I'm just going off history. And sometimes things surprise us, but I think that's a pattern that's reasonable enough to look at and agree with.